Hi everyone. The book I'm reviewing today is called Extreme Ownership: How US Navy SEALs Lead and Win by Jocko Willink and Reef Baben. There's the book. I highly recommend this book. It's not on my top 10 list of 2022, but rather a once in your lifetime read. This is definitely one of those books. I absolutely love the leadership concepts that they describe, but I think most importantly, it's how they give examples that demonstrate these, and they're really impactful and they really get you to sit and think and reflect. And that's powerful. And it's not many books that on leadership that do that so brilliantly as what they have done. So I'm going to read a few extracts for you, and hopefully that will convince you to read this as well. Once people stop making excuses, stop blaming others, and take ownership of everything in their lives, they are compelled to take action to solve their problems. They are better leaders, better followers, more dependable, and actively contributing team members, and more skilled in aggressively driving towards mission accomplishment. But they're also humble, able to keep their egos from damaging relationships and adversely impacting the mission and the team. I explained that the direct responsibility of a leader included getting people to listen, support, and execute plans. To drive the point home, I told him, you can't make people listen to you. You can't make them execute. That might be a temporary solution for a simple task, but to implement real change, to drive people to accomplish something truly complex or difficult or dangerous, you can't make people do those things. You have to lead them. I did lead them, the VP protested. They just didn't execute. But he hadn't led them, at least not effectively. The measure of this was clear. He had been unsuccessful in implementing his plan. I continued, as the commander, everything that happened on the battlefield was my responsibility. Everything. If a supporting unit didn't do what we needed it to do, then I hadn't given clear instructions. If one of my machine gunners engaged targets outside his field of fire, then I had not ensured he understood where his field of fire was. If the enemy surprised us and hit us where we hadn't expected, then I hadn't gone through all the possibilities. No matter what, I could never blame other people when a mission went wrong. I always thought I was a good leader, said the VP. I've always been in leadership positions. That might be one of the issues. In your mind, you're doing everything right. So when something goes wrong, instead of looking at yourself, you blame others. But no one is infallible. With extreme ownership, you must remove individual ego and personal agenda. It's all about the mission. How can you best get your team to most effectively execute the plan in order to accomplish the mission? I continued. That is the question you have to ask yourself. That is what extreme ownership is all about. Continuing, I told the VP, in those situations, you ended up with a unit that never felt they were to blame for anything. All they did was make excuses and ultimately never made the adjustments necessary to fix the problems. Now compare that to the commander who came in and took the blame. He said, my subordinate leaders made bad calls. I must not have explained the overall intent well enough. Or the assault force didn't execute the way I envisioned. I need to make sure they better understand my intent and rehearse more thoroughly. The good leaders took ownership of the mistakes and shortfalls. That's the key difference. And how do you think their SEAL platoons and task units reacted to this type of leadership? They must have respected that, the VP acknowledged. Exactly. They see extreme ownership in their leaders, and as a result, they emulate extreme ownership throughout the chain of command, down to the most junior personnel. As a group, they try to figure out how to fix their problems instead of trying to figure out who or what to blame. For those on the outside looking in, like our training group, or the board in your case, the difference is obvious. And that is how I appear to the board right now, blaming everyone and everything else, the VP recognized. There is only one way to fix it, I told him. At times he slipped back into defensiveness, so not wanting to accept blame. He felt in many ways that his knowledge exceeded that of many members of the board, and he was probably right. But that didn't change the fact that he was the leader of a team that was failing its mission. As we rehearsed the VP's portion of the board presentation, I was unconvinced that he truly accepted total responsibility for his team's failures. I told him that bluntly. "I'm saying exactly what you told me to," the VP retorted. "The reason that this mission was unsuccessful was my failure as a leader to force execution." "That's the problem," I said. "You are saying it, but I'm not convinced you believe it. Look at your career. You have accomplished amazing things, but you certainly aren't perfect. None of us are perfect. You are still learning and growing. We all are. And this is a lesson for you. If you re-engage on this task, if you do a stern self-assessment of how you lead and what you can do better, the outcome will be different, but it starts here. It starts at the board meeting when you go in, put your ego aside and take ownership for the company's failure here. The board members will be impressed with what they see and hear because most people are unable to do this. They will respect your extreme ownership, take personal responsibility for the failures. You will come out the other side stronger than ever before," I concluded. At the board meeting, the VP did just that. He took the blame for the failure to meet the manufacturing objectives and gave a solid, no-nonsense list of corrective measures that he would implement to ensure execution. The list started with what he was going to do differently, not about what other people needed to do. Now the VP was on his way to extreme ownership. When leaders who epitomize extreme ownership drive their teams to achieve a higher standard of performance, they must recognize that when it comes to standards as a leader, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. When setting expectations, no matter what has been said or written, if substandard performance is accepted and no one is held accountable, if there are no consequences, that poor performance becomes the new standard. Therefore, leaders must enforce standards. Consequences for failing need not be immediately severe, but leaders must ensure that tasks are repeated until the higher expected standard is achieved. Leaders must push the standards in a way that encourages and enables the team to utilize extreme ownership. The leader must pull the different elements within the team together to support one another, with all focused exclusively on how to best accomplish the mission. One lesson from the Bud's Boat Crew leader example above is that most people, like Boat Crew 6, want to be part of a winning team. Yet, they often don't know how or simply need motivation and encouragement. Teams need a forcing function to get the different members working together to accomplish the mission, and that is what leadership is all about. Once a culture of extreme ownership is built into the team at every level, the entire team performs well, and the performance continues to improve even when a strong leader is temporarily removed from the team. Leaders should never be satisfied. They must always strive to improve, and they must build that mindset into the team. They must face the facts through a realistically, brutally honest assessment of themselves and their team's performance. Identifying weaknesses, good leaders seek to strengthen them and come up with a plan to overcome challenges. The best teams anywhere, like the SEAL teams, are constantly looking to improve, add capability, and push the standards higher. It starts with the individual and spreads to each of the team members until this culture becomes the new standard. Corporate doesn't understand what's going on out there, said the field manager. Whatever experience those guys had in the field from years ago, they have long forgotten. They just don't get what we are dealing with, and their questions and second guessing prevents me and my team from getting the job done. The infamous they. We had two choices, I said. Throw our hands up in frustration and do nothing, or figure out how to most effectively operate within the constraints required of us. We chose the latter. I realized that if my chain of command had questions about my plans or needed additional information or more detailed paperwork, it was not their fault. I said. It was my fault. I knew we were making the right decisions and being careful to mitigate every risk we could control. I knew our combat operations were critical to achieving strategic victory in Ramadi. So if my boss wasn't comfortable with what I was doing, it was only because I had not clearly communicated it to him. The field manager looked at me, beginning to understand. So, if they have questions, it's my fault that they didn't get the information they need, asked the field manager. This completely contradicted his way of thinking and everything he had experienced in his leadership upbringing. That us versus them mentality was common to just about every level of every chain of command, whether military unit or civilian cooperation. But breaking that mentality was the key to properly lead up the chain of command and radically improve the team's performance. Listen, the senior leadership at corporate headquarters wants you to succeed, I said. That's a given. It's up to you to inform them and help them understand some of the challenges you are dealing with here on the ground. If you have questions about why a specific plan or required paperwork is coming down the pipe, don't just throw up your hands in frustration. Ask those questions up the chain to clarify so that you can understand it. Provide them with constructive feedback so they can appreciate the impact those plans or requirements have on your operations. That is what extreme ownership is all about. Much of what has been covered in this book has been covered in the past. We do not consider ourselves to be creators of a new paradigm of leadership principles. Much of what we learned or relearned has existed for hundreds and in some cases thousands of years. But although these principles are often simple to understand in theory, it can be difficult to apply them in life. Leadership is simple, but not easy. Likewise, leadership is both an art and a science. There are no exact answers or specific formulas to follow in every case. In any situation, there exists a great deal of gray area, neither black nor white. There may be an infinite number of options for potential solutions to any one leadership challenge. Leadership decisions are inherently challenging and take practice. Not every decision will be a good one. All leaders make mistakes. No leader, no matter how competent and experienced, is immune from this. For any leader, handling those mistakes with humility is the key. Subordinates or direct reports don't expect their bosses to be perfect. When the boss makes a mistake but then owns up to that mistake, it doesn't decrease respect. Instead, it increases respect for that leader, proving he or she possesses the humility to admit and own mistakes and, most important, to learn from them. While there is no guarantee of success in leadership, there is one thing that is certain. Leading people is the most challenging and therefore the most gratifying undertaking of all human endeavours. So, with that humbling reward in the distance, embrace the burden of command and go forward onto your battlefield, in whatever arena that may be, with a disciplined resolve to take extreme ownership, lead and win. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've read this book, let me know, and also drop me a comment to let me know what you're currently reading. Thanks.